Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We are planning on starting this presentation right on the hour because we've only got an hour for this to hear from Heather. So just admitting everyone a little bit early. Thank you for hopping on a couple of minutes early, and we'll get going here in just a minute. Okay, it's time. We're going to do this promptly. We're going to hear from Heather Hellyer today. She is one of the co-hosts of this summit, and I'm going to be super brief and go ahead and turn it over to our co-host, Chris Command, so that she can introduce Heather.
All right. Thank you guys again for being here. I just want to say if you've enjoyed this summit, please take a moment to say thanks to our next presenter. Heather has spent countless hours making sure this summit was a success, including all the graphics you've seen. She's helped not only line up speakers, but she also has helped them with their own presentations and so much more. I personally met Heather in 2023 at the Save Our Wild Horses Summit that she helped put together. I had no idea why she wanted me to speak at the conference, but when I met her, I don't know if you have ever had that feeling in your soul where it's like you know someone. That's what I felt with her, and something just clicked. So Heather is an absolutely amazing advocate. She's just a regular person like the rest of us who took time out to go out and explore wild horses. She fell in love with them and then started hearing about what was happening and decided to do what she could to create change. The knowledge she has gained over the last few years is nothing short of incredible. When I talk to her, I always feel like I'm talking to a live wild horse encyclopedia. Heather doesn't know this, but she comes up very often in my counseling sessions in a good way. As I struggle with my own self-esteem issues, I always tell my therapist that when Heather and I come together and work together, I believe that we really empower each other. My therapist agrees that relationships like this are what we all need more of, people who help build us up, not tear us down. You're in for a treat, and Heather, I am sure, did not allow enough time for the info she has to share, but make sure you come back later for our closing thoughts to hear more. I'll add that link in the chat. Thank you, Heather, for this presentation and for all you're doing to make this summit the success it has been.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jen, for introducing me, and thank you, Chris. That's almost bringing tears to my eyes, and I greatly appreciate that. It was really just such a pleasure to spend time with you and Gary this past year and take you guys out to see some wild horses in Cody and Rock Springs. And it definitely was a very special time, and I too consider you a very good friend and an absolute wealth of information. So thank you. Um, I am calling my presentation "Our Wild Herds Are Disappearing. Is it too late to save them?" So I'm going to very quickly go through a whole bunch of information. This beautiful photo that you see on the screen is from the Divide Basin HMA in Wyoming, sort of the south central Wyoming. It's a huge HMA, actually. I didn't see a whole lot of horses, but I've driven it a couple times, got a flat tire out there. Beautiful horses. It is one of the HMAs that the Bureau of Land Management would like to have disappear. So that's why I put that photo up here for you guys. Um, just a tiny bit about myself. I'm just going to read this very, very quickly. I first discovered wild horses in the year 2020 while my husband and I were on an RV trip to see national parks. And the very first herd that I visited was at the Spring Creek Basin HMA in Southwest Colorado. I knew absolutely nothing about wild horses or public lands. I had just simply Googled things to do near Cortez, Colorado, and the Spring Creek Basin wild horses came up. So it took us 2 days to find the herd because I knew nothing about public lands and how they worked or what the boundaries were or what the roads were going to be like. And I remember when we drove into the herd area, we saw this huge giant pile of horse manure. And I said to myself, why is all that manure in this huge giant pile? That shows you how little I knew at that particular time. After photographing my very first wild horses, I was absolutely hooked. And since 2020, have now visited over 55 wild horse and burro herds throughout the Western states, along the US East Coast, and in Canada. I document and photograph the wild horses, the burros, the conditions on the range caused by livestock, the fences, the fenced off water sources, and we have a tremendous amount of rare beauty on our public lands that 99% of people just don't get to go see. because they don't know it's there. They're not national parks, they're public lands. Most people just don't go out there. I've witnessed one roundup in Utah, the Cedar Mountain Roundup in 2022. I have visited 3 different holding facilities in Oregon, Utah, and Wyoming. After visiting that first wild horse herd, I then created the Save Our Wild Horses Facebook page. And in the fall of that year, I did the Save Our Wild Horses postcard campaign. I then co-created and co-hosted the 2023 Save Our Wild Horses DC conferences, and now spend the majority of my time creating action items and encouraging advocates to advocate on behalf of our wild horses. I will say that being on the range is my happy place, and wild horses have definitely changed my life, as they are known to do for many people. This is the Spring Creek HMA. You can see just how vast it is out there. You can see what condition that 2-track road is in and why you need a good vehicle to take out to most HMAs. And I finally knew after 2 days that I was in the right area because of that sign in the bottom right-hand corner that says wild horses. Faded, full of scratches, can barely see the photos. It needs to be replaced, but at least I knew I was in the right spot by then. The horse on the left is the very first wild horse I ever photographed. A gorgeous tricolor stallion who had that long stick stuck in his mane, and he is the one that got me hooked. The horse on the right is my wild heart horse, the gorgeous stallion Jetstream at McCulloch Peaks. He is the first horse I look for every time I go out there, and the one that I try to spend the most time with. All right, so this graphic here I created a few years ago. Chris was kind enough to share it in her presentation as well. I've sort of divided it in half here so you can see it a little bit better. When the Act of 1971 was passed, and they started naming all of these wild horse herd areas, they named at least 329 of them. And since the 1971 Act was passed, we have lost more than half of those herd areas. So what started out as 329 is now 165. What started out as 53.8 million acres across 10 Western states is now 26.8 million acres. And here's the bottom half of that graphic. So all of those red lines indicate HMAs that have been zeroed out by the Bureau of Land Management. And the herd areas in blue, including Salt Wells Creek, Divide Basin, and White Mountain, are herd areas that the BLM would like to zero out, as well as reduce the Adobe Town HMA in Wyoming by 60%. So if BLM office has their way by the end of this year, because they do plan to start rounding up the Salt Wells Creek and Adobe Town horses in July, even if the lawsuit is won, they're still going to go out and round them up, but maybe not zero them out. But if they do reduce those, remove those 3 herds, we will be down to 162 herds, and we will lose another 2.238 million acres of wild horse land on our public lands. This graphic is available on my website, by the way, and it's available as a downloadable PDF. It would be a great piece of information for you to take with you on a meeting with your legislators.
Heather, we lost your screen.
You did?
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, Craig Downer, yep, we're back. For some reason, there's a tab for Craig's screen at the moment. I am not sure why, but I think we had maybe hopped over to his screen, or at least that's what happened on mine. So, Heather, try again. We had gotten it back.
Yeah, I changed it so that only you could screen share, so we don't have that problem.
Great. We're back.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's what the problem is. Okay.
I'm going down.
So I just quickly wanted to talk about the herds that the Bureau of Land Management does want to zero out right now. So the Salt Wells Creek HMA near Rock Springs, Wyoming is 1.173 million acres with an appropriate management level for wild horses of between 251 to 365 wild horses. The Salt Wells Creek HMA is home to a rare genetic curly gene in the horses, and they are absolutely stunning. Honestly, I believe Salt Wells Creek should be turned into a national park. The entire area is just absolutely beautiful, and the amount of wildlife out there is fantastic. Also, the nearby Divide Basin HMA, which is 779,000 acres with an AML of 415 to 600. That is another HMA that the Bureau of Land Management plans to zero out. The nearby Adobe Town HMA is 478,000 acres with an AML of 610 to 800 wild horses. And the Bureau of Land Management wants to reduce the acreage and the number of wild horses by 60%. And then just for those of you who are new to Wild Horse Advocacy and are joining us on our summit, first of all, thank you. AML, which we abbreviate more often than not, does stand for appropriate management level. These numbers are arbitrary, are not based on any science whatsoever. Literally, somebody pulled them out of thin air, wrote them down on a piece of paper, and assigned them to a wild horse area. And the reason I bring that up is I also have this graphic here, which I have divided in half. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. It is also on my website, and I'll make sure that I add it again so you guys can download it and use it. But you can see here the number of herd areas under 15 wild horses or burros allowed. Look how many are there. And look how many actually have an AML of 0. And then look how many horses, wild horse and burro areas, the BLM only allows to have under 50 wild horses. Chicago Valley, 10 to 12. Chloride Canyon, 15 to 30. Which I've been to, by the way, and could not find a single wild horse. None of these herds on this particular page are at all genetically viable. The bottom half of the graphic, all of these herd areas at the top are between 50 to 100 horses. These herd areas in the middle between 100 and 200, a little more genetically viable. And then the only herds that are over 200 horses or burros as allowed by the Bureau of Land Management down here at the bottom. And you'll notice I have listed first Adobe Town at 610 to 800. Again, that is the herd that the BLM wants to reduce by 60%. So I wanted to bring up a case of a disappearing herd. The Kingtop HMA in Utah is like central western Utah near the Conger HMA. I didn't actually go to it, but it's 171,467 acres. It had an AML of 20 to 40. I visited a website and read a book by the wild horse tourist who had visited the herd when there were horses there. He couldn't find any horses on his last visit, so he called the BLM Utah office, and they told him they had rounded up the horses and only returned 25 stallions and no mares. So the population for Kingtop in 2410 was 10 horses. In 2015, it somehow jumped to 12. In 2016, went back down to 10. In 2018 was 5. In 2021 was 3. In 2022 was also 3. But in 2023, somehow miraculously jumped back up to 10. And in 2024, they still state there's 10. Now, I know one of those years listed is incorrect because I do have somewhere on my many, many files a copy of one of the population statistics for one of those years where they actually listed it as just one horse. And you can see down here at the bottom, I've cut and pasted a copy where it shows, I believe there's 3 horses for 2021. So that is a case of a disappearing herd. At some point, there's going to be just one horse out there all by itself who will eventually die on the range all alone. You guys have seen this map before. One of our previous presenters shared it. I love this map. Western Watersheds Project put it together. I've put the website there and I'll throw it in the chat box later. It's also available on the front page of my website as a link. All of those areas in sort of brown colors are current herd areas, and all of the areas in pink are ones that have been zeroed out. And this covers Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, California, and Nevada. So what I did was I took that map and I've been breaking it down. Montana here currently has just one wild horse herd left. And we just heard about the Pryor Mountain herds from both the Cloud Foundation and also from Nancy Cerrone. So you guys did hear lots of information about that herd, but presently they're the only one left. This is what Montana used to look like. So there were quite a few other herd areas available in Montana previously. So they have zeroed out at least 6 of the herd areas, leaving only the Pryor Mountains in Montana. I have heard that there are horses either around the Sweetwater or Rocky Hills area, but I've not personally been able to go there and find any myself. But I did have somebody tell me one time that there are some horses left out there. So again, here's the Pryor Mountain herd area. I'm not going to stick with this one because we've heard about the Pryor herd a couple times now. But again, these areas in pink that are attached to the brown area, those are areas of the Pryor Mountain wild horse range that have been reduced. So when Catherine talked about that BFF, that big giant fence that they put in, they fenced them out of these areas. I'm going to move on to Colorado. Colorado presently just has 4 wild horse herd areas left. I've been to 3 of them. Sandwash Basin is very popular. I'm sure most of you have heard of them. Spring Creek Basin's down there at the bottom. In the middle, we have Little Book Cliffs, Wild Horse Range, and the Piceance East Douglas horses. So those are the 4 remaining herds in Colorado. And I included some beautiful photographs there. The top one is Little Book Cliffs. The middle one is my stallion at Spring Creek Basin. And the bottom photo is a Sandwash Basin horse. Again, all of these graphics are going to be available on the website later this week. So I'm going to move through them pretty quickly. Here is Colorado showing the now disappeared wild horse herds. Douglas Mountain, North Piceance, West Douglas, and Naturita Ridge. So there are the 4 herds in Colorado who have so far been disappeared, for lack of a better word. And I know that they also want to try and get rid of the Piceance East Douglas herd as well. Here's Arizona with the horse and burro herds. Arizona has quite a few burro herds there. So half of these are, actually more than half of them are burro herds. The only herd that I've been to in Arizona is the Surbot herd. Beautiful horses. I have them photographed there on the right. A definite direct Spanish traits. I know Craig Downer's been out there. His PDF that he wrote on that herd is one that I read before I went out there. Very heavily used by livestock. There's houses being built at the entrance to the HMA by the highway. These horses are being pushed farther and farther up into the hills. And in fact, the entire west half of the HMA has been fenced off, so they can no longer access it. And here are the now missing zeroed out HMAs in Arizona. Tassie Gold Butte, Havasu's been reduced, Alamo's been reduced, Painted Rock, wild horse and burro herds in Arizona that no longer exist. Those beautiful burros there I photographed in the Black Mountain HMA, which we heard a lot about from Lori and Kathy. Utah's got quite a few remaining HMAs. I've been to a handful of these, including the Roundup at Cedar Mountain. The Onaki herd is obviously probably the most popular wild horse herd that we have in the United States, followed by Sandwash Basin and McCulloch Peaks. So quite a few herds left here, but many of these are very low HML. This is also the state where that King Top herd that I told you about is located, one of our disappearing herds. North Hills I went to. I talked to a rancher there. He had 100 head of cows out there who were all getting ready to give birth. So that 100 head were about to be multiplied to 200. And when I spoke to him, he was getting ready to go hook up his trailer and bring his sheep out. It's a small area. The group of horses that I did see, once they spotted me from a mile away, took off running the other direction. But he does allow them to drink out of his water trough, so that was nice of him at least. And here are the herds in Utah that are now gone. Robbers Roost, Lawn Wash, Burbank, Onaki itself. Look at how much Onaki has been reduced by. Quite a bit. There's quite a bit of pink there that used to be part of the Onaki herd. Cedar Mountain's been greatly reduced. Hill Creek is gone. Range Creek has been reduced. Winter Ridge is gone. Sinbad's been reduced. Muddy Creek's been reduced. Lots and lots of acreage gone that used to belong to wild horses and burros. I did want to talk about the Blonde Wash HMA for a little bit because I know there's been some talk of moving horses onto state land and so forth. The Blonde Wash HMA, again, was zeroed out. It's now actually Utah state land. So it's no longer public lands, it's state lands. As I drove up the road to get to there, you can see they were cutting down all of the native pinyon junipers on the side of the road just for miles and miles of cut down native pinyon junipers. When I called the Utah BLM office in Cedar City, Chad told me that they were cutting down the pinyon junipers so that the elk would have more grasses to feed on. Meanwhile, on the other side of the road were a whole bunch of cattle. On the left upper corner there are some horses up in Blonde Wash, even though it's been zeroed out. It could be some horses that they've missed, or those horses could have somehow made their way from the nearby 4 Mile or Bible Springs HMAs and made their way back up into Blonde Wash, but there's a handful of horses there. And as you can see by the bottom left-hand corner, there's something of a handmade trough for the cows. The land there did not look good. Admittedly, I was there in May and there was still snow on the ground. But still the land the sagebrush and so forth there has been absolutely decimated by the livestock grazing. So clearly removing the horses from an HMA is not at all beneficial to the land, as we can clearly see. I'm going to move on to Oregon, where I've shared a couple photos of the South Steens horses. Honestly, the most beautiful herd I think we had on the range. And I say had because, as we all know, the Bureau of Land Management absolutely decimated that herd last summer, returning only a few horses and just leaving a few out there. Oregon does still have quite a few herd areas left. The Pokegama herd outside of Ashland, between Ashland and Klamath Falls, Oregon, is one that the Bureau of Land Management was looking at zeroing out. There was a lawsuit that was successful. The herd is still there presently. Yeah, and some of these, I believe the Beatty Butte herd is on the schedule for this year to be rounded up. Murderers Creek is in Central Oregon near Bend. I actually did go out there with Gail Hunt from Central Oregon Wild Horse Organization. We didn't see any horses. It was hunting season, saw plenty of signs of horses. Actually, I spotted a spring that the horses had dug out at the base of a tree that had a bit of water in it. So that was a pretty cool find. Unfortunately, Gail Hunt did have a lawsuit to stop the Forest Service and BLM from zeroing out that herd. The courts sided with Forest Service, and the Murderers Creek joint HMA will be zeroed out. Here are the HMAs in Oregon that have been zeroed out, quite a few of them, as you can see. It actually can get quite depressing to make these lists, just knowing that there were beautiful wild horses out on these areas at one time, and they are no longer there. And here's where those horses used to be located. Lots and lots of pink areas in amongst the existing HMAs, a couple up here to the north central Oregon, all gone. And then I noted too, quite a few of the HMAs have been reduced. That does include South Steens. Used to be quite a bit larger than it is now. Paisley Desert's been reduced. Palomino Buttes has been reduced. They round up Palomino Buttes pretty regularly. And I remember somebody stating the other day, I think it was Janine, that most wild horse HMAs don't have signage. Palomino Buttes did have a sign at the highway where you could enter the HMA. And as she said, as with most signs, they're just riddled with bullet holes. And the last time that I went by there, the sign had been removed entirely. The nearby Stinking Water HMA also has a sign letting you know that you've entered the HMA, but that, as Janine said, that's very rare. Very rare. Three Fingers over here to the far right, bordering Idaho, has also been greatly reduced. That HMA suffered a wildfire, gosh, 8-9 years ago. BLM went out and removed a bunch of the horses, said that they would return them once the land had recovered. They never did, but that area, parts of the Three Fingers HMA, is absolutely decimated by livestock grazing. And I just wanted to share with you some of the beautiful Oregon wild horses that we do still presently have. In the upper right-hand corner, we have the Kygers. The two photos below the Kygers, the black and white and the one underneath of them, are the only horses that I found in the Three Fingers HMA. And I drove around all day for 10 hours looking for horses. This band came up over the hill and greeted me just as I had decided to leave. Beautiful little band. We've got some South Steens horses in here. This beautiful Palomino in the middle is from the Palomino Butte HMA, as well as that band on the run in the bottom left-hand corner. This gorgeous Appaloosa that you're looking at is the only horse I saw in the Warm Springs HMA, which, given is a huge area. I drove around that HMA all day for 8 hours. That was the only horse I saw. The Warm Springs HMA is also the only HMA that also has wild burros in Oregon. And then over to the left, some more South Steens and a beautiful Kiger stallion in the upper left-hand corner there. Moving on to the state that actually has my favorite HMAs in it, as awful as their wildlife and wild horse policies are, Wyoming. As you can see, most of the HMAs are in South Central Wyoming. I have noted the Giant Salt Wheels Creek HMA, the Divide Basin HMA, and the reduction of the Adobe Town HMA. If BLM has their way, those will be zeroed out. The White Mountain HMA, they're kind of going back and forth on. They did state they wanted to zero it out, but the most recent RMP I read, I believe, states it's going to stay there. The White Mountain HMA is an interesting one because it does border Rock Springs, Wyoming, and the town of Rock Springs has signs all over the place directing you to the Pilot Butte Wild Horse Loop that you can drive around and see the horses on. So it's kind of crazy to me that the town of Rock Springs themselves would then allow the BLM to zero out that HMA. And I realize the town has no say, but you would just think that, you know, as far as tourism dollars go, that Pilot Butte Wild Horse Loop is listed in brochures and hotels. The town has statues of wild horses in bronze. There's even a restaurant on the main road near the Walmart called the Wild Rose Mustang Restaurant or something like that. Up at the top, we have McCulloch Peaks and 15 Mile. And then the rest of them are all pretty much grouped together down here. And here's the sad graphic showing Wyoming with all of the now disappeared, zeroed out HMAs. And you can see that there are a lot of them. A lot of them. I can't believe how many more used to be up around the Cody area. McCulloch Peaks itself has been reduced by at least 25%. Between McCulloch Peaks and Pryor's, there used to be another herd called North Shoshone. To the east of McCulloch Peaks, there used to be a herd called Foster Gulch. You can see the 15-mile HMA has been reduced by at least 50%. There's all sorts of little HMAs dotted there in the middle that no longer exist. I put some asterisk marks down here at the bottom to show that Salt Wells Creek and this middle asterisk here, actually, the Salt Wells Creek area, White Mountain, there actually used to be an HMA here, actually called, oh darn it, I have forgotten the name of it, but I want to say the Checkerboard HMA or something like that. And they broke it up and divided it into these other ones and then just reduced them and zeroed out a bunch of them. So here's that list of HMAs that no longer exist. Again, if BLM has their way, there will be 2 more added to that. And here are some photographs of Wyoming's absolutely stunningly beautiful horses, as every herd is. McCulloch Peaks up there in the left-hand corner has my favorite band. You can't see Jetstream, he's hiding behind Sunrise there. On the left was a beautiful couple who absolutely loved each other, Two Socks and Tequila. They'd been together for years. Two Socks has disappeared from the range about a month ago. He was 21 years old. He lived and died on the range, which is how it should have been. Jetstream is now on his own, and Tequila and Sunrise have been taken over by 2 younger stallions. They're a mother-daughter pair. That foursome were just 4 peas in a pod, just never very far apart from each other, but with the loss of Two Socks, that band has dissolved. Up in the middle, we have Salt Wells Creek, gorgeous stallion, whose name is escaping me, but I want to say that's Medicine Man. Upper left-hand corner are some horses that I found near the Crooks Mountain HMA. The mane on that mare was just absolutely stunning. The gorgeous Appaloosa in the middle is the well-known stallion Looking Glass from the Lost Creek HMA. And I again want to thank Jen Britton for giving me the GPS coordinates for that horse. He happened to be exactly in the same spot 2 weeks after she saw him. We have the Green Mountain HMA in the middle. The very popular and well-known stallion Teton in the bottom left-hand corner with his blue eyes. Down at the bottom here, this landscape shot with these horses, These horses were part of the Dishpan Butte HMA. The Dishpan Butte HMA is up near it's actually part of the Northlander complex. The HMA itself is divided by a highway, and the horses are not able to get from one side of the HMA to the other. These horses were part of a very small herd of about 24, 25 horses who lived in the western part of the Dishpan Butte HMA, which I would go visit every single time I went to Wyoming. It was one of my favorite areas to go spend time with that gorgeous little herd. When the BLM went and decimated the Northlander complex last summer, they, for some ridiculous reason, instead of just taking the dishpan horses on the larger side of the HMA on the east side of the highway, they went and took all but one of the horses on the west side. So all of these horses you see in this photo were rounded up and removed. They left one stallion out there all by himself for a month or two or three until they finally took 4 horses from somewhere within the Northlander complex and released them into that area to give that one horse 4 companions. If I'm not mistaken, those 4 horses were all stallions, and I don't remember reading whether or not they released any mares back out there or not. One of the reasons that we really want to protect the Salt Wells Creek wild horses in Wyoming that BLM wants to zero out is because this is one of the very few herds that have curly horses. It's a rare gene. I know there's another herd in Nevada that had quite a few. They're absolutely stunning. And this is, I think I took this in October. So while he might have been getting some of his winter coat in, you can just see that curliness within his coat as well. And up there on his very short mane. Here's a foal who is definitely going to be a curly when it gets older. Again, you can see those ripples in its coat and that little curly cute mane up there. This beautiful stallion, absolutely stunning. Curly coat, curly mane and tail. This is one of my favorite horses out there. The Salt Wells Creek herd, honestly, it's one of the most beautiful herds out there. Their colors with those curly manes and tails, just absolutely stunning. Very few pintos out there, but it just doesn't matter because the other colors of the horses out there are just gorgeous. This young guy I photographed a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. Again, beautiful curly. He does have some of his winter coat, but you can just tell. Look at those little curly bits in his ears. Just absolutely adorable. And another photo of this gorgeous stallion. So this herd, we don't want to see any more herds disappeared or zeroed out. I don't even know. Yeah, it disappeared or zeroed out. But this herd in particular, they need to be saved. The EA is done. The decision's final. We are waiting for the results of the lawsuit, which I guess the next hearing is in March. But even if that lawsuit is successful, BLM intends to round up this herd and remove most of these horses, which they tend to do every 2 to 3 years here because they absolutely refuse to do any sort of fertility control on this herd. But the herd has 1.173 million acres. And my guess is that there's probably about 450, 500 horses out there. That's more than enough space for that many horses. So the only reason this herd is going to disappear is because of the 15 to 20 families that run the Rock Springs Grazing Association, who, by the way, sublet out most of their leases. So they're paying $1.35, but they're subletting their leases out and making anywhere from $15 to $30 a month so that private ranchers can stick their livestock out there. All right, I'm going to move on to Idaho. Idaho presently has 6 wild horse herds remaining. The Sands Basin is a very small HMA. That one did have a sign letting you know that you had arrived in the HMA. It was, again, full of bullet holes, as Janine noted. Gorgeous little HMA with beautiful horses. 4 Mile HMA I had gone to shortly after a roundup. I saw only those 3 horses in the top right-hand photograph. They were the only 3 horses I saw the entire time they were out there, a little group of bachelor stallions. And then, as many of you may know, we had a wildfire, several wildfires actually in Idaho this year, and the 4 Mile HMA, the Sands Basin HMA were both just absolutely devastated. Nearly the entire HMAs were completely burned. BLM did go out and remove all the horses under an emergency roundup. They are stating they are going to hold on to those horses and release them once the range has recovered. But remember, I mentioned the Three Fingers HMA earlier, where those horses never got returned. So that is something we need to keep our eyes on, to make sure the horses do get put back out there. There was another HMA affected as well. I just honestly can't remember if it was Hard Trigger or Black Mountain. Look at 30 to 60 horses for Black Mountain. I drove all over Black Mountain for an entire day. And I did not even see any signs of horses. I know they're out there. And I know it's only 50,000 acres. A lot of that HMA is really tough to get to. I saw some really beautiful scenery out there, but no horses on that day that I spent out there. And here's the HMAs that Idaho is now missing because they were zeroed out. So Morgan Creek, Sheep Mountain, and West Crane. HMAs that no longer exist in Idaho. This bottom stallion, by the way, amongst those super tall grasses, he was in that Sands Basin HMA, just absolutely stunning. And now I'm going to jump on to California. Probably going to try and move along a little quicker here so I can answer a few questions before we go. California's got quite a few herds left, but very, very, very low AMLs. A lot of burro herds out there as opposed to horses. And some of their HMAs are both horses and burros. And then over here on the right, you can see the pink areas and all of the HMAs that have been zeroed out for both burros and horses. Janine talked to you the other day about the New Year's Lake HA up here at the top. And then most of the rest of them are down here in Southern California. And here's a list of those HMAs in California that have been zeroed out. Again, quite a few of them, mostly burros for the most part. New Mexico quickly. New Mexico just has two herd areas left, both horses. And they had two other HMAs that were zeroed out. Godfrey Hills. I'm probably going to pronounce the other one incorrectly, but Punchy Valley. No more horses there. Nevada. Nevada has the most wild horse herds of all the states combined, by a lot, actually. They've got 89 left. Many, many, many herd areas spread out all across the state. All these different colors are different herd areas. The only one I've currently been to is Pine Nut Mountain. So many of you who are Pine Nut Mountain fans will recognize those horses. And this is what Nevada used to look like. So nearly just as many herd areas have been zeroed out in Nevada as exist, if not more. This is a tremendous number of wild horse and burros, probably more burros than horses, but that have been zeroed out in Nevada. You know, and I did these arrows and stuck these names in everywhere, you guys, to make a point. You know, each herd area had a name. Those horses had an area that they lived in, and they're all gone. And I did this because when I do put these graphics up on the website in PDF form, I want you guys to download them. I want you to share them with your legislators to make a point for each one of these states that we can't lose any more of our herd areas. We just can't. Here's that list. And I'm not even sure I got them all on this graphic. This is a tremendous list of HMAs in Nevada that have been zeroed out. So is it too late to save them? You know, many people would say as such. Somebody even wrongly said that by 2026 all of our herds would be gone. That's not true. But there are so many things that you guys can do to get involved. Call, write, email your legislators, get appointments, talk to them, get your friends and family involved. Do booths at farmers markets, craft fairs, put a table in front of your library, in front of your local grocery store with permission, of course. Show people horses, photos of the horses in the burrows. Talk to them about how they're being removed, because I can guarantee you most of the public doesn't know. They just don't know, and our legislators don't know. Will you go outside of your comfort zone to help our wild horses and burros? Because they are definitely worth it. And when I say go outside of your comfort zone, I just want you to remember that legislators, journalists, all those people, they're just regular people doing a job just like you do. And there's no reason not to pick up the phone and call them. No reason whatsoever. You might be nervous, but after the first time or two that you do it, you'll be in on hand, and then you can do it all the time. And I just think it's so worth it to keep these guys out on the range. So that's all I had. My website is up there if you guys want to go take a look. Again, besides this video being on our YouTube channels, I'm going to throw all these graphics up on a presentation on the website. Chris is going to host me in about a month or so. I'm going to do a webinar telling you guys how to go out and find wild horses, tips for visiting the range, directions on where they are and how to get to them. So thank you for that, Chris. We'll put that out when it's been scheduled and let you guys know.
Thank you so much, Heather. And so many people are in the chat, as I'm sure you can see, thanking you
Messages,
so much. And I also think there are a lot of participants that are really angry because just like you said, once you see the map of this and you see all of the arrows and the areas that are being zeroed out and your list, it's really it comes all together. Instead of thinking about just California, just Wyoming, you're now just seeing it all across the Western states. So thank you so much for taking the time to pull all of that together and for sharing it with everyone.
Oh, happy to.
I'm gonna work my way back for just a second. Jeannie wants to know what your where we can go to your website. Can you
Save I'll put it down here.
Yeah.
Saveourwildhorses.net, not .com, .net.
Yep, it's in.
And again, give me a few days to get these slides up there. I'll put a link to it on the homepage as well.
Thank you so much. All right, we definitely collected a lot of questions, so I'll do my best to work through these. So Cecile had a really good question. I think several people outside of the United States are asking the same thing. What can people outside the US do to help the wild horses?
Yeah, and we have wild horse advocates from all sorts of countries, right? And they're always asking me what can they do, because technically you're not supposed to write to our congressional members if you're outside of their district. So really share, because if you have friends in the States, they might not know we have wild horses. You can write the White House. I'll leave that there. And yeah, that's all I can say is, do some of the action items that I do put up are ones that you guys can do. You guys can mail letters. You guys can send postcards. You can even make a call. You might not be able to access their contact page via their website because you do have to put in your address and your zip code so they can verify you're a constituent. Doesn't mean you can't pick up the phone and call. They might ask you if you're a constituent, and I'll leave you to answer that question to them or not. But so there are ways you can help. I wish there were more, but just definitely still keep sharing the plight of our wild horses and burros.
Absolutely.
Can I intercept and just say, you can send emails to the states, and I think that if you throw it in as a tourism aspect, like I was going to take a trip to Wyoming from Germany, but now I'm seeing how you're zeroing out these herds and I think I'm not coming. Those kind of things I think can be impactful. And while you can't go on the websites and fill those out, I understand that gets to be a problem. You can contact us and we may be able to find a contact for somebody in those offices. I know I've got at least 500 cards from different congressional offices that I've visited. So let us know and we can try to do something that way, Heather.
Yeah, and now that you bring that up, Chris, I should have shared the graphic, but when I took you and your husband out to McCulloch Peaks, I looked through McCulloch Peaks has a guest book at their full sign that you can fill in, and I took pictures of the pages just from last year alone, and there were people from all over the world, Norway, Germany, Australia, and I could go on, just who had come and seen the horses. Now, mind you, they might have been there to actually go to Yellowstone National Park, but the point is they also made it a point to go out and see the McCulloch Peaks wild horses. So yes, as international people, I would, even pull up local chamber addresses and tourist places in some of these towns and just send them a letter. I want to come see the horses, but if you guys are going to keep zeroing out, I'm going to spend my tourist dollars elsewhere.
There's two other things, and this is why I love this, and this is why this is so great. One, Kim has just said, can they call their American embassy and talk about the tourist money you spend in the States? Absolutely. And I think, and that's something we don't know, right? Possibly the American embassy can put you in touch with someone that can help you get through to those state senators or governors or whatever else. And the other thing, I think it was Ginger had said, for people up in Canada, absolutely start working on stopping wild horse slaughter up there, because that's a problem where, like, help our horses not have a slaughter pipeline going up to Canada. So those are also
Right.
really big things you could do that we would be more than happy to help you with.
Yep.
To that end, Cecile also wanted to know, is there any report about the economic impact of tourism and wild horses in the US?
No. And that's something we, when the McCulloch Peaks herd was slated to be rounded up, in 2022, that decision was made and they were rounded up from late 2022, well, bait and trapped, into early 2023. That was something that I did a lot of, was asking people to send me letters of how much money they had spent in Wyoming to go visit not only the MP herd, but the other herds there. And I received a lot of letters with figures on them. But because Cody, Wyoming and the McCulloch Peaks herd, and in fact, all of Wyoming in general, is so close to Yellowstone National Park, it's just too difficult to determine how many tourism dollars are spent to see wild horses versus how many are spent to go see Yellowstone National Park. And so this is why I said in a previous presentation, if you guys go see wild horses, every single business you go to in that town, your hotel, the restaurants, anything you go by, tell the people that you are there, be spending money in their location because you are there to see the wild horses. And we have to make these towns aware of that.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry to keep intercepting, but
Go ahead.
um, um, I I just seen, I think it's North Carolina put together a formula for figuring out how much wild horses are worth in tourism dollars. And I'm actually going to use that as part of my testimony when I go before the North Dakota legislatures this week. I also want to say that again, people who fall from the sky in my life, I have a person who's working on grants for me, and when I sent her this formula and asked her, she let me know that she also did market research in the formula. She goes, everything's a guess, right? But this was a very well educated guess, and she thought it was good. The second part of that is that I think Cynthia said something, Cynthia Smoot, in her presentation, and I'm actually getting ready to upload hers to YouTube. And I have to go back and listen to her exact words, but we have to start putting a value on wild horses and owning that. And if one thing a friend of mine keeps saying is just to assume authority. And so I think that we have to just say, like, I'm going to stand in front of the North Dakota legislators and say, hey, the Theodore Roosevelt National Park wild horses bring in a minimum of $37 million a year to North Dakota. And I'm going to do it from the standpoint of, if I'm wrong, prove me wrong. Right. And I think we need to do that more and insert that value. And that's something that Cynthia talked about. Sorry.
No, I think don't apologize. That was a great point. Chris, every time you interject, it's always something good. Okay,
I did see
so
somebody asked how can they find wild horses or how can they attend a roundup. So again, I just want to remind you guys that Chris is going to be hosting me on a webinar about finding wild horses. And again, once we get that Facebook page set up, I'll start sharing them out. So I just put my Save Our Wild Horses Facebook link in there for any of you that are not following that page. Please do, so that you can get the information on that.
Hey, Heather, before I forget this
Yeah.
thought, because there's a lot, I think that what we can also do is we can send an email out to all of our presenters and maybe just say, if you have things you talked about in your presentation, handouts, contact information you want us to give, maybe we can go back and add that to our website so that people can, I know a lot of people ask for contact information from people, but that might be a great thing to do. And this Facebook page that you're putting together will be a great place to put that too, I think.
Yep, I think you're right.
Connie wants to know if you have the dates of when the HMAs have been zeroed out.
I don't. I actually tried to look up some of that stuff the other day. The BLM website was down, which happens quite often, and I started to wonder if it was down permanently, but then it popped back up. I have on a bunch of various hard drives as many of the population statistics pages that I can find from years past. I need to compile them all into one location. And if and when I do that, I'll put that on the website somewhere. Roundup information is a little harder to gather from many years past. Sometimes BLM keeps that up and sometimes they don't. I do have a spreadsheet from I think 2021 where I listed them all and how many horses had been killed and how many had been rounded up. And again, it's on a hard drive somewhere, but that's information that would take quite a bit of time to compile and might even require some FOIA requests at this point.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, I've got a couple of questions. People want to know if you would ever let them come out with you while you are observing or photographing wild horses.
That question always puts this huge giant smile on my face. And I know that there are some people in the chat box who have asked me that very thing. And there's a couple I'm actually going to be taking out. For those of you that don't know, I presently live on Maui in Hawaii. So I do still return to the mainland a couple times a year, typically in June and October, my two favorite months to go out. We might be returning to the mainland, which will make me much more available. But to answer your question, yes. Feel free to reach out to me. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and throw my email address in the chat box. I also am looking at possibly offering a time slot, a couple days in June to take people out to the Salt Wells Creek herd because they are slated for 0 out. And then whether that happens, there's still a huge roundup starting July 15th to remove most of those horses. And I would love for you guys to see that area and see those horses before that happens. So yeah, it's one of the things I absolutely love to do. I took Chris and her husband out to McCulloch Peaks last year, and then I took Chris out to Salt Wells Creek, and I just remember Chris saying over and over again, look how beautiful this area is. Look how beautiful these horses are and how quiet it is out here. It's really just something special to experience. And I wish all wild horse advocates could do so. But yeah, reach out to me and I'll see what I can do.
Awesome. Thank you. That's very generous. Oh, great. That took care of several questions. So many people want to join you. I love that. I do too. Heather, I'm making notes. I'm like, okay, well, Wild Narrative is probably going to report on Salt Wells, so I probably ought to connect with Heather.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, so Carrie had a question going back to Kingtop. She says, was there no comment period for Kingtop? How was it legal for them to 0 out?
That's actually a really good question, Carrie, because I can't even find out yet. Again, the website was down a couple days when I tried to find information. I can't even verify yet when that roundup happened. And unfortunately, the Wild Horse Tourist has also taken his website down. So, there probably was. I'm certain there was an EA finalized, et cetera, et cetera. What it said in the EA, I just haven't been able to find yet, but that is something I will keep looking for.
That would be great. This makes me think it would be worth compiling a list of ongoing comment periods. They're just so hard to find. You have to be, they say they make it public, but it's public light. It's just, they put it somewhere in the corner of the website or within a document, and you really have to hunt for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to answer Angela's question again, Angela, yes, there is a lawsuit for what we're really calling it is the checkerboard herd. I actually do have a whole website that let me grab it really quick, but the checkerboard herd consists of the Salt Wells Creek, Divide Basin, White Mountain, and Adobe Town HMAs. And the checkerboard is, I know we only have a couple minutes left here. The checkerboard is 1 mile pieces of public and private land. And it's those herds that are part of the lawsuit. And so, yes, the lawsuit lost its portion in a Wyoming court, and it has been moved to a 10th district court in Colorado, where AWHC has had luck in the past. Can't remember my new website name. I'm trying to find it here. Has had luck in the past with getting a lawsuit won. So that next hearing, according to Carol Walker, is in March. So I'm certain we'll hear about it one way or the other, and fingers crossed it's successful. But again, either way, they're still going to go out and round up those horses to low AML.
Right, and we will
Yep.
have AWHC as our second to last presenter today, so we can bring those questions there too.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask one more question, and this is will be helpful for people who are newer to wild horses and advocacy. Jeanette wants to know, do all these horses end up in slaughter, and does anyone keep track of what happens to them?
Well, I mean, that's a really loaded question, right? We know that wild horses are ending up in slaughter, but at this point, what BLM considers is not technically wild horses. The horses that are ending up in the auction pens and so forth are titled horses. So the reason that BLM is not stepping in is because they now consider them to be domestic. Um, and so, no, I've got to say no. Most of the horses that are rounded up are not going to slaughter. I know that's something that is spread around a lot. It's just most of them, as we know, are in holding pens. Somehow that holding pen number seems to stick at, there's the new website, you guys, if you want to grab that really quick.
Right.
Seem to stick at the number of 60,000. And I'm awfully curious about that number and why. I mean, they rounded up over 9,000 horses last year, over 20,000 horses in 2023. How is that number sticking at 60,000? You can't tell me these horses that are in these off-range pastures are dying off at such a great rate. And I've looked at usaspending.gov at some of the contracts of some of these holding pastures, and the payments stop. And I have to wonder why. Why are the payments stopping to the holding pastures? So, it's a really good question, and it's probably going to, again, require some FOIAs because many of those horses, those holding pastures are private. We don't know where they're at. Often there's an address, but the address is either just a mailbox address or a house address. Believe me, I have Google mapped some of those addresses to see if I can see horses in a pasture, and I don't. So, anybody out there who just doesn't work and wants a free full-time job, contact me because I'll show you how to use usspending.gov and how to find those contracts. And if you want to delve into that, I think that's something that would be incredibly interesting.
Okay. Heather, I was making a note because I'm going to contact you about that. I do have a full-time job and volunteer
I know
job,
you
but
do.
here we go, because that's what we're all doing. Okay. Let's see. Carrie wants to know, and I'm not sure if she was talking about specific herds. She says, are those herds contiguous? I think she was talking
Yeah.
perhaps about.
I mean, and I don't know specifically which one she's talking to, and this probably will have to be our last question for today, you guys.
Okay.
We need to get on to Eric Mulvar here in a few minutes, but some of those herds were contiguous, yes. As you can see on the maps, whether they were divided by fencing or not, I don't know. I was saying to my husband a day or two ago as I was making up those maps, I said, it would be super interesting to go out to some of those zeroed out areas. And it would be kind of difficult to find out where they are. But it'd be interesting to go out there and see what condition the range is in now that the horses are gone and document that and use that as an argument that removing the horses did not at all help the condition of the range, right?
I think
So,
that's very interesting.
yeah. Yep.
Thank you so much. I just realized that we were butting up against time. Really appreciate it. This has been, you have so much knowledge. It's awesome. And I love that you are nearly putting a bookend on this summit and that Chris started it. I think it's amazing. Thank you so much. Everybody here is giving you claps and high fives and hearts. And thank you so much. And
Thanks,
we
guys.
will, everyone, just remember Heather's going to be having another talk through Chris and Chasing Horses Wild Horse Advocates in about a month on going out and looking for wild horses, how to find them, and what the etiquette will be. So stay tuned.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks everybody for coming today. We'll see you in a couple minutes on Eric's presentation.
Great. Thank you.